The conference hall on Unity Prime was filled with voices. Hundreds of alien diplomats from across the galaxy sat in their seats, talking and arguing. The air smelled strange, a mix of different atmospheres that each species needed to breathe. At the center of the massive room, a holographic display showed the vote count climbing higher and higher. Admiral Jiwon Park stood near the back wall, her arms crossed over her uniform. She watched the numbers change with a face that showed nothing. Inside, her heart felt heavy. She had known this day would come, but knowing it and seeing it happen were two different things. Resolution 847 passed with an overwhelming majority. The alien diplomats cheered. Some banged their appendages on their desks. Others made sounds that humans could not make. But the meaning was clear. They were happy. They had won. Counselor Vex stood at the main podium, his reptilian scales catching the light. He raised his clawed hands for silence. When the noise died down, he spoke in a voice that carried through the hall. "Today marks a new era for the Galactic Council," Vex said, his tongue flicking between words. "For too long, humanity has controlled our military operations. They have imposed their rules, their methods, their aggression upon peaceful species. No more. From this day forward, humans will have no authority over peacekeeping missions. They will not command our fleets. They will not interfere in our affairs." More cheering. Admiral Park felt someone step beside her. It was Captain Hyun Choi, one of her younger officers. His jaw was tight and his hands were balled into fists. "They have no idea what they just did," Hyun whispered. "No," Park agreed quietly. "They do not." The council gave Park one chance to speak. She walked to the podium slowly, her boots clicking on the metal floor. The room grew quiet but not respectful. She could feel the hostility radiating from many of the delegates. They wanted her to leave. They wanted all humans to leave. Park stood at the podium and looked out at the sea of alien faces. She had prepared a long speech, but now she realized it would be pointless. These people had made up their minds long ago. In the last 50 years, Park began, her voice steady. Humanity has stopped 47 wars before they could start. We have protected 231 worlds from pirate raids. We have contained 6 plague outbreaks that would have killed billions. We have maintained the quarantine zones that keep ancient weapons locked away. We have done this not for glory, not for power, but because it needed to be done. She paused, looking at Vex, then at the other counselors. "You are making a mistake. Without coordination, without someone willing to act quickly, the galaxy will fall into chaos. Pirates will raid freely. Old conflicts will reignite. The threats we have been holding back will return, and you will not be ready." Senator Liss, an aquatic creature in a water-filled suit, made a bubbling sound that the translators turned into laughter. Other delegates joined in. "Fear-mongering," Vex declared. "This is exactly the kind of rhetoric we are voting to end. Humanity wants us to believe we cannot survive without them. We will prove otherwise." Park looked at them for a long moment. Then she nodded once and walked away from the podium. There was nothing more to say. That evening, in a secure room far from the council chambers, Park met with her senior staff. Dr. Minji Han was there, along with Captain Choi and Lieutenant Somin Yoon. Yoon was the youngest, barely in her late 20s, but her eyes were hard with anger. "Tell them," Park said to Yoon. Yoon activated a holographic display. Documents appeared in the air, showing communication logs, financial transfers, and secret meetings. For the last 2 years, Yoon explained, several council members, including Senator Liss, have been in contact with the Void Syndicate. They have been paying the pirates to attack human colonies. They wanted incidents they could use to paint us as aggressive, as unstable. They manufactured the crisis that led to today's vote. Dr. Han shook her head sadly. She had spent decades building relationships with alien species, learning their cultures, teaching them about humanity. Now it all felt like a waste. "What happens when we present this evidence?" Choi asked. "I already tried," Yoon said bitterly. "The council buried it. They said it was fabricated." "Human propaganda." The room fell silent. Park stood and walked to the window. Outside, Unity Prime sparkled with lights from 1,000 different civilizations. She had helped build this peace. She had bled for it, and now it was rejecting her. "Earth has made its decision," Park said quietly. "We are leaving," nobody argued. They had all known it was coming. The next 3 weeks were a blur of activity. Across the galaxy, humans began to pack up and leave. They did it quietly, efficiently, with no drama. Colonies were evacuated. Trading posts were closed. Military bases were dismantled. Dr. Han worked around the clock to make sure that species who depended on human infrastructure would not be left helpless. She transferred control of hospitals, power stations, and water treatment facilities to local governments. She left detailed manuals on how to maintain everything. Some aliens watched the humans leave with confusion. Others watched with satisfaction. A few watched with growing worry. Ambassador Kira, a feathered diplomat from the Windborne Collective, tried to speak with Park before she left. "Please," Kira said, her wings folded tight against her body in a gesture of distress. "Not all of us wanted this. Some of us tried to stop it." Park looked at the ambassador with tired eyes. "I know, but not enough of you tried hard enough. Take care of yourself, Kira. The galaxy is about to get much more dangerous." Captain Choi commanded the last human ship to leave Council space. From the bridge of his vessel, he watched Unity Prime shrink in the distance. His crew was silent. Most of them had been born in this galaxy, had never known any other home. Now they were leaving it all behind. "Should we say anything, sir?" his communications officer asked. "Send a final message?" Choi thought about it. He thought about all the speeches he could give, all the warnings he could repeat. But what would be the point? They had not listened before. They would not listen now. "Send this," he said finally. "You wanted independence from us. You have it. May you find the peace you were searching for." The message was broadcast on all frequencies. Then Choi ordered his ship to jump to faster than light speed. Within seconds, they were gone. Back on Unity Prime, the message played in the council chambers. Some delegates laughed. Others nodded with approval. Councillor Vex smiled, showing his sharp teeth. "Good riddance," he said. Ambassador Kira said nothing. She stood at a window and watched the empty space where human ships had been. She had a terrible feeling in her chest, like watching someone walk off a cliff while smiling. She wanted to be wrong. She prayed to her ancestors that she was wrong, but she knew she was not. In the weeks that followed, the council celebrated its victory. There were parties, speeches, and declarations of a new age of cooperation. Without human interference, they claimed, the galaxy would finally know true peace. They reorganized their military structures. They appointed new commanders. They made plans for a bright future. Humanity left no trace except for empty stations and silent communication channels. They had departed without a sound, like ghosts fading into the dark. The galaxy barely noticed they were gone, not yet. 6 months had passed since the last human ship disappeared from Council space. High Marshal Thon stood in the command center of the Council Defense Fleet, staring at a tactical display that showed nothing but bad news. Red markers indicated pirate raids. Yellow markers showed trade disruptions. Orange markers were distress signals that had gone unanswered for too long. The insectoid commander's mandibles clicked together in frustration. Before humans left, the display had been mostly green with only occasional yellow warnings. Now it looked like someone had spilled paint across the galaxy. "Marshal," one of his officers called out, "another raid in the Rimward territories. The colony on Beta 7 is under attack. They are requesting immediate assistance." Thon checked the fleet positions. The nearest council ships were 3 days away at maximum speed. 3 days. The humans used to respond to such calls in hours, sometimes minutes. "Deploy the 3rd Squadron," Thon ordered. "Tell them to move as fast as possible." But even as he gave the order, he knew it was too late. Beta 7 would be ashes before help arrived. Just like the 12 other colonies that had burned in the last month, the pirates had grown bold without human patrols to fear. The Void Syndicate, in particular, seemed to be everywhere at once. Their ships raided mining operations, attacked merchant vessels, and terrorized frontier worlds. Council forces could barely keep up. They were always one step behind, always arriving too late. What Thon did not know was that some council members were still secretly supporting the pirates. Senator Liss and her allies had not stopped their schemes just because humans left. They continued to feed information to the Void Syndicate, telling them which routes were unguarded and which colonies had weak defenses. They profited from the chaos they created. On the other side of Council space, Ambassador Kira watched her homeworld prepare for war. The Windborne Collective and the Thraxian hegemony had been arguing over a border dispute for years. Humanity had always kept the peace, forcing both sides to negotiate instead of fight. Now there was no one to stop them. Kira stood on a landing platform as military ships lifted into the sky. Young soldiers who should have been studying or building or creating were instead being sent to kill and die over a stretch of empty space that neither side really needed. Her aide approached, a younger windborn with dark feathers. "Ambassador," she said quietly, "the Council has voted again. They refuse to intervene in the conflict. They say it is an internal matter between two sovereign nations." Kira closed her eyes. Of course they did. The Council was good at voting and making speeches. They were terrible at actually doing anything difficult. Have they forgotten already? Kira asked. Have they forgotten that humanity used to handle situations like this in days? They would show up with enough force to make both sides think twice. Then they would sit everyone down and make them talk until an agreement was reached. The aide said nothing. What could she say? The truth was obvious to everyone who was willing to see it. The galaxy was falling apart. The war between the Windborn and Thraxians lasted only 3 weeks, but it was brutal. Thousands died. Orbital stations were destroyed. Cities burned. Counselor Vex watched from his command ship as Windborn fighters strafed his people's colonies. He had wanted this war once, had pushed for it in closed-door meetings. Now he wondered why. His second-in-command approached hesitantly. Counselor, we have received word from the Home Defense Fleet. They report 3 more Windborn battle groups jumping into the system. Our forces are outnumbered, Vex hissed through his teeth. Where is the Council support? Where are the reinforcements they promised? Still being organized, sir. High Marshal Thawne says they will arrive within 10 days. 10 days. Vex wanted to laugh. 10 days ago, he could have called human peacekeepers and they would have been here within hours. They would have parked their powerful ships between the 2 fleets and dared anyone to fire. And no one would have because everyone knew the humans meant what they said. Now there was no one to stop the killing. The Council talked and voted and formed committees while people died. But the war was not the worst problem. Far out on the edge of Council space, something else was happening. A research station studying ancient technology sent out a distress call. Pirates had breached the station. The scientists were being killed. Worse, the pirates were stealing the dangerous technology the station had been built to study. The automated distress system tried to contact human rapid response. The frequency was still in its memory, programmed years ago when the station was built. But no one answered. Humans were gone. The system tried other channels, but by the time it reached Council forces, everyone at the station was dead. High Marshal Thawne flew to the station personally to investigate. What he found chilled his blood. The scientists had not just been killed. They had been tortured, probably for access codes and security information. The pirates had taken everything of value, including weapons technology that could destabilize the entire region. Thawne walked through the blood-stained corridors and felt something he had not felt in years. Fear. Real, bone-deep fear. Humans had prevented things like this. They had maintained watch over dangerous sites. They had responded instantly to threats. Without them, the galaxy was vulnerable in ways most people did not understand yet. He tried to explain it to the Council, but they did not want to hear it. They were too busy dealing with the economic crisis. Trade between sectors had collapsed. Human merchant marines had run the most reliable shipping lanes in the galaxy. They guaranteed deliveries, protected cargo, and maintained the infrastructure that made interstellar commerce possible. When they left, insurance costs for shipping went up by 500%. Many companies simply stopped trading across long distances. It was too expensive and too dangerous. Worlds that depended on imports began to suffer. Food shortages appeared on planets that had not grown their own crops in generations. Medical supplies ran low. Manufacturing ground to a halt without raw materials. The Council economy, which had seemed so strong and stable, began to crack. Senator Liss felt the consequences personally. The Tidecaller Commonwealth, her home nation, had 3 thriving colony worlds in the Outer Rim. They exported rare minerals that were vital to her species' economy. But without human protection on the trade routes, pirate raids became constant. One colony was abandoned after the 5th raid in 2 months. Another was destroyed completely, its population scattered as refugees. Liss's people turned on her. They knew she had been part of the movement to push humans out of power. They blamed her for the disaster that followed. Protests filled the aquatic cities of the Tidecaller homeworld. Her political career, once so bright, crumbled in weeks. She stood before the Tidecaller Parliament, water swirling around her suit as angry representatives shouted questions. "You promised us independence," one representative shouted. "You said we would be better off without human interference. Now our colonies burn and our people starve. What do you have to say?" Liz had no good answer. The truth was too painful to speak. She had been wrong. They had all been wrong. Humanity had not been oppressors. They had been the foundation that held everything together. And now that foundation was gone. Ambassador Kira tried one last time to reach out to humanity. She used old diplomatic channels, sent messages on every frequency she could think of. She offered apologies, explanations, pleas for help. Her messages traveled through space, searching for any sign of human civilization. Nothing came back. Not even an acknowledgement that the messages had been received. It was like shouting into a void. Kira sat in her office late one night staring at the communication console. Had they moved so far away that signals could not reach them, or were they simply ignoring all contact from council space? She did not know which possibility was worse. What she did know was that the galaxy was in trouble, real trouble, and it was only going to get worse. High Marshal Thon compiled a report for the council. He documented every raid, every failed response, every preventable disaster. He showed them statistics comparing response times before and after humanity left. He highlighted the growing threats that council forces were not equipped to handle. The council read his report and formed a committee to study the problem. They scheduled meetings to discuss possible solutions. They debated and argued and accomplished nothing. Thon sat in those meetings and felt a growing sense of despair. These people did not understand. They thought this was a temporary problem that could be solved with better organization or more resources. They did not see that humanity had provided something irreplaceable. It was not just their ships or their soldiers. It was their willingness to act, to make hard decisions, to do what was necessary without waiting for permission or consensus. The council species had never learned to do that. They had relied on humans for so long that they had forgotten how to be decisive, and now people were paying the price. As the 6th month ended and the 7th began, the cracks that had appeared in galactic civilization began to widen into chasms. More colonies fell to pirates, more wars started, more economies collapsed. The galaxy that had celebrated humanity's departure with such joy was now starting to realize what it had lost. But the true crisis had not yet begun. That was still to come. 18 months after humanity left, the emergency sirens wailed across Unity Prime for the first time in 100 years. High Marshal Thon ran through the corridors toward the command center, his multiple legs moving faster than most species could track. Other officers rushed alongside him, their faces showing various expressions of panic across a dozen different alien features. "The plague worlds," someone shouted as Thon burst into the command center. "The containment has failed." Thon felt his blood run cold. The plague worlds were a cluster of 8 planets that had been contaminated centuries ago by biological weapons from an ancient war. The plague that lived there could kill most known species within hours. Humanity had maintained the containment systems, checking them regularly, repairing any damage, keeping the death locked away where it belonged. "Show me," Thon ordered. The tactical display lit up with red warnings. 3 of the plague worlds showed containment breaches. Ships that had gone too close were already showing signs of infection, and the plague was spreading. Spores were drifting on solar winds toward inhabited systems. "How long until it reaches the Corvin system?" Thon asked. His voice was steady, but his mandibles trembled. 4 days, maybe 5. The Corvin system had a population of 12 billion. Thon accessed the database, searching for the human protocols on plague containment. He found files, but they were incomplete. The humans had taken their detailed procedures with them when they left, leaving only basic outlines. It was enough to understand what needed to be done, but not enough to actually do it. "Evacuate the Corvin system," Thon ordered. "All of it. Every planet, every station, every ship. Move the population to safe zones and establish a quarantine perimeter." But even as he gave the orders, he knew they would not be fast enough. Evacuating 12 billion people took time. Time they did not have. In the end, they saved about half. 6 billion people died screaming as the plague ate through their bodies. It was the worst disaster in Council history, and it could have been prevented if the containment systems had been properly maintained. While the Council struggled with the plague, something worse emerged from the dark spaces between stars. The Devourers returned. Ambassador Kira was on her homeworld when the first reports came in. She sat in her study, reading reports about the plague disaster when her assistant burst in without knocking. Ambassador, the Devourers. They are back, Kira felt her hearts freeze. The Devourers were biomechanical horrors from some unknown origin. They consumed everything in their path, breaking down matter and energy to fuel their endless hunger. Humanity had fought them 40 years ago in a brutal war that lasted 5 years. The humans won, barely, and then set up monitoring stations to watch for any sign of their return. Those monitoring stations were abandoned now. No one had been watching. The Devourers hit the Outer Rim colonies first. They moved through systems like locusts through a field, leaving nothing but empty space behind them. Council forces tried to fight back, but their weapons barely slowed the Devourers down. The biomechanical creatures adapted to every attack, learning and evolving faster than any defense could be organized. High Marshal Thon threw everything he had at them. Warships, missile platforms, experimental weapons. Nothing worked. The Devourers kept coming, and they were spreading faster than anyone could track. "We need the human tactical database," Thon told his staff. "They fought these things before. They must have left some information we can use." His officers searched and they found files. Dr. Minji Han had left extensive documentation about the first Devourer War. But reading about human tactics and actually implementing them were very different things. The humans had used coordination and speed that Council forces simply could not match. They had weapons specifically designed to fight Devourers, weapons that no one else knew how to build. System after system fell. Millions died. Refugees fled deeper into Council space, overwhelming the infrastructure of the core worlds. Refugee camps turned into cities. Food ran short. Disease spread. The economy, already damaged, collapsed completely. Councillor Vex watched his homeworld burn from a ship in high orbit. The Thraxian hegemony, once one of the most powerful nations in the Council, was being destroyed piece by piece. Devourer machines crawled across the surface of his world, consuming everything. Cities, forests, oceans. All of it was being broken down into raw materials for the endless hunger. He stood on the observation deck, his clawed hands pressed against the transparent hull, and watched his civilization die. His aide stood nearby, not knowing what to say. Vex spoke quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. "I did this. I pushed them away. The humans tried to warn us, and I called them fear-mongers. I thought we would be stronger without them. I was a fool," the aide said nothing. What could she say? The truth was obvious to everyone now. But the truth came too late. Vex was not the only one facing consequences. Across the galaxy, the species that had celebrated human departure now faced extinction. The war between the Windborn and Thraxians had ended, not through peace but through mutual exhaustion. Both sides were too busy surviving to keep fighting each other. Unity Prime itself had to be evacuated. The great station that had been the symbol of galactic cooperation for 500 years was abandoned as Devourer forces moved toward it. The Council government scattered, with different species retreating to their homeworlds. The Galactic Council effectively ceased to exist. There were no more sessions, no more votes, no more speeches. There was only survival. High Marshal Thon worked without sleep for weeks, trying to organize some kind of defense. But it was like trying to hold back the ocean with his bare hands. Every time he stabilized one sector, 3 others collapsed. Every small victory was followed by a dozen defeats. Late one night, exhausted and desperate, Thon accessed the human database one more time. He searched through Dr. Han's files looking for anything that might help. And then he found something. A file marked with unusual priority indicators. The label read, "Do not open until absolutely necessary." Thon stared at that label for a long time. Then he opened the file. What he read made his entire body go rigid. The file contained classified human intelligence reports from the years before their departure. The humans had detected something. Signals from beyond the galactic rim. Energy patterns that matched no known phenomenon. Something ancient and terrible was stirring in the dark space between galaxies. The humans called it the Eternal Night. They calculated that it would reach the galaxy within 3 to 5 years. The Devourers, the file explained, were not the main threat. They were scouts. Advance forces for something much worse. Humanity had known this was coming. They had tried to warn the Council in subtle ways, tried to prepare the galaxy. But when the Council turned on them, when it became clear that galactic civilization was too divided to face such a threat, the humans made a different choice. They left to fight alone. They built their own defenses beyond the galaxy's edge. They were buying time, holding the line while hoping the Council would somehow get itself together. The file ended with a simple note from Admiral Jiwon Park. "We did not abandon you. We are standing between you and the darkness. Survive long enough, and perhaps you will be ready to stand with us. If you cannot survive on your own, then you were never ready to face what is coming." Thawne sat back in his chair, the file still glowing in front of him. Everything made sense now. The humans had not left in anger or spite. They had left because it was the only way to protect the galaxy from itself and from what was coming. And the Council had been too blind, too arrogant, too foolish to see it. Thawne called Ambassador Kira. She was the only other Council member he trusted, the only one who had tried to stop the madness before it started. "Kira," he said when she answered, "I found something. Something that changes everything. We need to talk. In person. Now." They met on a small station in neutral space, far from the fighting. Thawne showed her the file. Kira read it slowly, her feathers fluffing with agitation. When she finished, she looked at Thawne with wide eyes. "They knew," she whispered. "All this time they knew, and we drove them away." Yes, Thawne's voice was heavy. "But there is more. The file contains coordinates. A rally point. Humanity left us a way to find them, if we ever came to our senses." Kira looked at the coordinates. They pointed to a location far beyond the galactic rim, in the dark space where no one ventured. "We have to go to them," Kira said. "We have to beg them to help us. It is the only chance we have." Thawne nodded. "But we must be prepared. They owe us nothing. After what we did, they would be justified in refusing. Then we humble ourselves," Kira said firmly. "We admit we were wrong. We ask for forgiveness. And if they say no, then at least we will die knowing we tried." They gathered what ships they could. The remnants of Council civilization. Refugees, soldiers, scientists, anyone who could move was loaded onto vessels. They were abandoning the galaxy, fleeing toward the coordinates humanity had left behind. As the fleet prepared to jump beyond the rim, Kira sent one final message back to Council space. It was a warning and a plea. "To anyone who survives, we were wrong about humanity. If you can, follow us. If you cannot, then remember this. The humans were never our enemies. They were our guardians, and we cast them out." The fleet jumped. Behind them, the galaxy burned. Ahead in the darkness was hope. The journey to the coordinates took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of traveling through empty space where no civilization had ever ventured. Ambassador Kira stood on the bridge of the lead ship, watching the darkness outside. Behind them, a ragtag fleet of 200 vessels carried the last hope of Council civilization. Refugees, soldiers, children, all of them fleeing toward an uncertain future. High Marshal Thawne checked the navigation systems for the 100th time. The coordinates were leading them beyond the galactic rim, into the space between galaxies. No one went there. There was nothing there but darkness and radiation, except apparently humanity. "What if they do not want to see us?" one of Kira's aides asked quietly. "What if they attack?" "Then we deserve it," Kira said simply. "But I do not think they will. That was never their way." On the 20th day, their sensors detected something. Energy signatures. Massive ones. Thawne ordered the fleet to slow down and proceed carefully. As they drew closer, their scanners showed more detail. What they found took their breath away. Humanity had built a fortress. Actually, they had built dozens of fortresses. Massive stations, weapon platforms, and shipyards stretched across space like a wall. And behind that wall, human ships patrolled in formations that made Thawne's military mind appreciate their efficiency. These were not the peacekeeping forces the Council had known. This was a war fleet prepared for something terrible. A communication came through. The voice was human, speaking in perfect Council common. "Unidentified fleet, you have entered restricted space. State your purpose." Kira stepped forward, her voice steady despite her fear. "This is Ambassador Kira of the Windborne Collective, and High Marshal Thawne of the Council Defense Fleet. We come seeking humanity. We bring refugees and survivors. We come to ask for help." There was a long pause. Then the human voice responded, "Stand by. Admiral Choi will meet with you." A human ship approached. It was larger than any vessel the Council had ever built, covered in weapons and armor. It docked with Kira's ship, and a delegation came aboard. Admiral Hyun Choi walked onto the bridge. He looked older than Kira remembered. His hair had gone gray at the temples and his face carried new lines. But his eyes were the same, sharp, intelligent, kind. Ambassador Kira, Choi said, nodding respectfully. Marshal Thon, we hoped you would come. Those words nearly broke Kira. We hoped you would come. Not you should have listened. Not we told you so. Just a simple acknowledgement that they had been waiting, hoping the council would survive long enough to find them. Admiral, Kira began, but her voice cracked. She took a breath and tried again. We were wrong. About everything. We drove you away and our galaxy paid the price. Millions are dead, billions displaced. We come not as representatives of the council because the council no longer exists. We come as refugees begging for your help. Choi listened quietly. His face showed no judgment, no anger, just tired understanding. You are not the first to arrive, Choi said finally. Small groups have been finding us for the past 6 months. Each one tells the same story. The galaxy is falling apart without someone to hold it together. Thon spoke up. Admiral, we found Dr. Hand's file. We know about the Eternal Night. We know you left to face it alone. Why did you not force the council to help? You had the military strength. Choi smiled sadly. Because forcing people to fight for their own survival does not work. They have to choose it. The council was too busy fighting each other to see the real threat. If we had stayed and forced the issue, civil war would have torn the galaxy apart anyway. At least this way we were able to prepare while giving you time to learn. Time to learn, Kira repeated bitterly. We learned too late. Most of our people are dead, but some survived, Choi said gently. And those who survived are here now, ready to fight. That is what matters. Come, I will show you what we have been doing. Choi took them on a tour of the defensive network. What they saw was staggering. Humanity had built entire fortress worlds in just 3 years. They had constructed weapon systems designed specifically to fight the Eternal Night. They had established supply lines, communication networks, and fallback positions, and they had been fighting. The war at the Rim is constant, Choi explained as they walked through a command center. The Eternal Night sends probing forces almost daily. We hold them back, but it costs us. We have lost 20% of our population in 3 years. Every human who can fight is on the line, 20%. Kira felt sick. That was tens of billions of humans. Dead. Protecting a galaxy that had cast them out. Why? Thon asked simply. Why sacrifice so much for people who betrayed you? Choi stopped walking and looked at them. Because someone has to, he said. Because if we do not, billions more will die. Because we made a promise long ago to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The council may have rejected us, but that does not change who we are. They met Admiral Jiwon Park later that day. She was in her 70s now. White-haired and moving stiffly, but her presence filled the room. She sat across from Kira and Thon in a simple office and studied them with eyes that had seen too much death. Admiral Park, Kira began. We owe you an apology. We owe all of humanity an apology. We were blind and foolish. We thought we did not need you. We were wrong, Park nodded slowly. Yes, you were. But you are here now, and that is what matters. The question is, what are you willing to do? Are you ready to fight? To take orders? To work together without politics and pride getting in the way? We are, Thon said firmly. Whatever you need. Whatever it takes. Park studied them for a long moment. Then she nodded. Good. Because we are going to need every ship, every soldier, every mind we can get. The Eternal Night is preparing for a major offensive. Our intelligence suggests they will attack within the month. When they come, they will not stop until everything is consumed or destroyed. She stood and walked to a window that showed the vast defensive network. We have been holding this line alone for 3 years. We have bled and died while the galaxy learned its lesson. But now you are here. Now we can truly fight back. Park turned back to face them. I'm not going to lie to you. Many of you will die. Probably most. The Eternal Night does not negotiate. It does not retreat. It consumes. But if we stand together, if we truly work as one, we might survive. And survival means everything. Over the next weeks, the Council refugees were integrated into humanity's defensive network. It was not easy. Species that had barely cooperated before now had to work side by side. Old prejudices had to be set aside. But the threat of extinction was a powerful teacher. Thon found himself commanding a mixed fleet of human and alien ships. The humans taught him their tactics, showed him how to coordinate different species' strengths. He learned more in those weeks than in decades with the Council. Kira worked with Dr. Minji Han, who had aged but lost none of her passion for cross-species cooperation. Together they organized the civilian refugees, finding roles for everyone. Engineers, medics, scientists, everyone had something to contribute, and they waited. Humans and aliens together, watching the darkness beyond the defensive line, knowing that something terrible was coming. On the 27th day, the sensors detected it. A massive energy surge at the edge of detection range. The eternal night was coming. Admiral Park gave the order. All hands to battle stations. This is not a drill. The enemy is here. Across the defensive network, alarms sounded. Millions of beings rushed to their posts. Humans worked alongside Windborn, Thraxians next to Tidecallers. Species that had been enemies were now allies because they had no other choice. Kira stood on the bridge of her assigned ship, watching the tactical display. The eternal night appeared on the sensors like a spreading stain. It was huge, bigger than any fleet, any force she had ever imagined. It was darkness given form, hunger made manifest. She looked at the human officer next to her. "Are we ready for this?" The officer smiled grimly. "No one is ever ready for this, but we will fight anyway. That is what we do." Admiral Park's voice came over all channels. "All ships, all stations. The hour we have prepared for is here. We fight not just for ourselves, but for every species in this galaxy. We fight for those who cannot fight. We fight because someone must stand against the darkness, and we will not fall. Not today. Not ever." The eternal night reached the defensive line, and the battle began. The eternal night moved like a living thing. It flowed through space in waves of darkness that consumed everything they touched. Ships, stations. Light itself seemed to dim when it drew near. High Marshal Thawne watched from his command ship as the first wave hit the defensive line. Human weapon platforms opened fire. Beams of concentrated energy tore into the darkness, creating brief flashes of destruction. But the eternal night kept coming. For every piece that was destroyed, 2 more took its place. "All ships, engage at will," Admiral Park's voice commanded across all frequencies. "Remember your training. Stay coordinated. Watch each other's backs." Thawne led his mixed fleet into battle. Human cruisers flew alongside Windborn fighters and Thraxian destroyers. For the first time in galactic history, the species fought as true partners. No one gave orders based on politics. No one held back to gain advantage. They fought as one because they had to. The battle was chaos. Ships exploded, stations crumbled. But the defensive line held. The humans had taught them well. Each species used their natural advantages. Windborn pilots used their incredible reflexes for hit-and-run attacks. Thraxians provided heavy firepower. Tidecaller engineers kept systems running under impossible conditions. Ambassador Kira coordinated intelligence across the fleet. She processed information from dozens of sources, spotting patterns in the Eternal Night's attacks and relaying weak points to the combat ships. It was not glamorous work, but it was vital. Hours passed. Then days. The battle never stopped. The Eternal Night pressed forward relentlessly, and the defenders fought back with everything they had. Casualties mounted on both sides. On the 3rd day, sensors detected something new. A massive energy concentration deep within the Eternal Night's formation. Dr. Han analyzed the data and called Admiral Park immediately. "Admiral, it is a command node. If we destroy it, the entire attack wave will lose coordination. They will fall back to regroup." Park studied the tactical display. The node was deep behind enemy lines. Any ship that went after it would have to fight through massive defenses. It would be a suicide mission. Commander So Min-yoon volunteered immediately. She was older now, a veteran of countless operations. She had risen through the ranks to command an elite strike team. "I can do it, Admiral," Yoon said. "My team is ready." Park looked at her for a long moment. Yoon knew what that look meant. "This was a one-way trip, I know," Yoon said quietly. "But if we do not take this chance, millions more will die. Someone has to do it." "Let it be us," Park nodded slowly. "Godspeed, Commander. Make it count." Yoon assembled her team. 20 ships, a mix of humans and aliens who all understood what they were about to do. They said their goodbyes, made their peace, and launched. The strike force punched through the Eternal Night's outer defenses. Ships exploded around them. But they kept pushing forward, deeper into the darkness. Yoon led from the front, her ship taking hit after hit but refusing to stop. They reached the command node. It was a massive structure of twisted energy and matter, Pulsing with power, Yoon armed every weapon her ship had. For the galaxy, she said simply. Her ship and the others unleashed everything at once. The command node shuddered under the assault. Then Yoon rammed her ship directly into its core. The explosion lit up space like a newborn star. The command node shattered. And across the battlefield, the Eternal Night's forces faltered. Their coordination broke. They began retreating, pulling back into the darkness beyond the defensive line. The defenders did not celebrate. They were too exhausted, too aware of what the victory had cost. 20 ships, 20 crews, hundreds of lives, including Commander Yoon. All gone. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of her flagship and saluted the empty space where Yoon had died. Around her, every human and alien officer did the same. The battle was over, but the war would continue. The Eternal Night would return. It always did. But for now, the line had held. In the days that followed, the survivors took stock of their losses. The defensive network was damaged but intact. Casualties were heavy. Nearly 30% of the combined fleet was gone. But they had won. They had proven that united, the galaxy's species could stand against the darkness. High Marshal Thon walked through a memorial garden that humans had built on one of their fortress stations. Walls covered in names stretched into the distance. Human names, alien names, all the dead from 3 years of holding the line. He found Commander Yoon's name freshly carved into the newest section. Thon placed a small crystal there, a Thraxian tradition for honoring the fallen. As he stood, he noticed Captain Hyun Choi standing nearby, also looking at the memorial. She saved millions, Thon said quietly. Species that once wanted nothing to do with humanity. She died protecting them anyway. That was always our way, Choi replied. We protect not because we are asked, but because it is right. Yoon understood that better than anyone. Thon turned to face the human. Admiral, why do you do it? After everything the Council did to humanity, why do you still fight for us? Choi smiled sadly. Because someone has to stand against the darkness. Because every life matters, even if those lives once rejected us. Because we are all that stands between civilization and extinction. If we do not fight, who will? He paused, looking out at the stars. And because we hope that someday the galaxy will learn to stand on its own, we cannot protect you forever. You need to be strong enough to protect yourselves. Ambassador Kira joined them at the memorial. She had been crying. Her feathers were ruffled from stress and grief. But her eyes were clear. The Council is calling for a new assembly, she said. The species that survived want to rebuild. They want to create something better than what we had before. They are asking for human input. Choi shook his head gently. No, you do not need us to tell you how to govern yourselves. That is your choice to make. We will be here if you need military help. But the politics, the laws, the society you build, that has to be yours, Kira looked surprised. You do not want seats on the new council? No positions of power? We never wanted those things, Choi said. We took them because someone had to. Because the galaxy needed order and protection. But now you understand the cost of that protection. You have fought beside us. You know what it takes to defend civilization. You are ready to do it yourselves. What will humanity do? Thon asked. Stay here. Watch the rim. Stand between you and the Eternal Night until you are strong enough to stand with us as true equals. That day will come. We just need to survive long enough to see it. Later that night, Admiral Park called a meeting of human leadership. The military commanders, the civilian administrators, the scientists, everyone who had helped build and maintain the defensive line. The council species came back to us, Park said. Not all of them. Not even most. But enough. They fought well. They bled with us. They proved they can learn. She looked around the room at tired, battle-worn faces. We made the right choice 3 years ago. Leaving gave them space to understand what they had. Losing that made them appreciate it. And facing extinction together made them see us as partners instead of oppressors. What now? Someone asked. Now we continue the mission. We hold the line. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. And we help the council rebuild, not by doing it for them, but by standing beside them. Park smiled. It is what we have always done. It is what we will always do. Months passed. The new Galactic Council took shape, built on lessons learned through pain and loss. The species worked together better than they ever had before. They shared resources, coordinated defenses, and set aside old grievances. The shadow of the eternal night had taught them what humanity had tried to tell them all along. United they could survive, divided they would perish. Humanity remained at the rim, the eternal guardians. They asked for nothing. They demanded nothing. They simply stood watch, ready to fight when called, patient when ignored. Ambassador Kira visited the human stations regularly. She brought news from Council space, shared intelligence, and maintained the friendship that had survived so much. On one visit, she found Captain Choi at the same memorial garden, standing before Commander Yoon's name. "You come here often," Kira observed, standing beside him. "Every day," Choi admitted. "To remember what we fight for. To honor those who gave everything." They stood in silence for a while, two old friends who had seen too much death. "We were fools to drive you away," Kira said finally, the words she had been carrying for years. "Maybe," Choi replied. "But you came back when it mattered. You fought beside us when everything was at stake. That is what counts." He turned to look at her. "The galaxy will face the eternal night again, probably many times. But next time we will face it together, not as superiors and subordinates. Not as protectors and protected, but as allies. As friends." Kira felt tears on her face. "After everything we did, after all the harm we caused, you still call us friends." "Everyone makes mistakes," Choi said gently. "What matters is what you do after. You learned. You changed, you grew. That is all anyone can ask." They watched the stars together, standing at the edge of the galaxy. Behind them, billions of beings from hundreds of species lived and worked and built a better future. Ahead of them, the darkness waited. But they were ready. Together they were ready. Humanity had left without a sound, and the Council had paid for their arrogance in full. But from that payment came understanding. From loss came wisdom.